Well, the Toronto Raptors won their first game last night against the Philadelphia 76ers. It was a fun game. It was a long game. It was an excruciating game. It was a lot of different things. There were a lot of really fun performances, bounce back performances, all kinds of stuff. And we will get to that. I am excited to talk about this one. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. And right off the bat, we've got to talk about the bounce backs. So the last game against the Cleveland Cavaliers was not pretty, and one of the reasons it wasn't pretty was because two of the best players on the team had down nights. Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl both struggled in that game. Scotty Barnes only scored 9 points, Jakob Poeltl had 5 turnovers, and both looked outmatched on both ends. Last night, however, the Toronto Raptors got great performances from Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl. They both looked excellent, and they were two of the main driving factors in the Toronto Raptors win, 115-107 against the shorthanded Philadelphia 76ers. And yes, the Philadelphia 76ers were without star big man Joel Embiid and their newest acquisition, Paul George. Both were missing from the lineup. The Toronto Raptors took advantage of that. And one of the reasons that the Philadelphia 76ers lost this game was that they really just did not have enough firepower. The Sixers have been relying primarily on Tyrese Maxey to create opportunities for himself, generate shots off of the dribble, and without Joel Embiid setting those screens, and without a secondary creator who is very good, he can be keyed in on by the defense, and that certainly happened last night. The Toronto Raptors really focused their attention on stopping Tyrese Maxey. It helped out that they had a Tyrese Maxey stopper in the lineup. Davon Mitchell did a very good job on the defensive end, and they also used Ochai Agbaji to cover Tyrese Maxey, and then off the bench, Jamal Crawford covered Tyrese Maxey as well. And that trio slowed down Tyrese Maxey. He did have 24 points, but it was on 23 shots, so the efficiency was not very good for him. He only had 4 assists. It was a slow night for him. He shot 2 for 12 from 3. He didn't really get a lot of breathing room or space to operate, so the Toronto Raptors understood the assignment. It was kind of a one-man show. They had one guy to really stop, and they did that for the most part, so good job. I mentioned last game that their perimeter defense really needed work. They kind of proved me wrong by showing me that they can guard a premier offensive player on the perimeter. We got to talk about the elephant in the room. If you watch the game, it started at 7 o'clock. It ended at, I believe, 10 o'clock, or maybe just before or just after 10 o'clock, a 3-hour game. And the reason was because both teams shot 99 free throws. I have honestly, in my decades of watching the NBA, I have never seen a game with this many free throws. I've never seen a game with over 90 free throws. Just an absolutely horrible game to watch. And you have to blame the refs. Yes, teams foul. I think you could call a foul on almost every possession if you were eagle-eyed enough. The problem is that the game flow, when there's that many calls, it grinds down. It is horrible. And the tactics that Nick Nurse used at the end, he likes to gum up games, and one way you can do that is with fouls. And I think a lot of the fouls that the Raptors committed were just kind of young player type fouls where you are a little over-eager, but the refs have to understand when a game is going like that, you have to lay off of the whistle a little bit and let them play a little bit more, because it was just a slog to watch. It was horrible to watch. I'm pleased with the outcome, but I can't get too excited about that game because of just the sheer volume of free throws. Now, let's get down to the performances. I mentioned Scotty Barnes off the top, and I think he had a nice game last night. I think he could still get better, but to be honest, I am satisfied with the game last night. He really showed up at the end of the game, especially. He really carried the Raptors through the final few possessions when the Sixers were making a run with the full court pressure. He had 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, and 4 turnovers. But due to the lack of shooting on the floor, with many of the Toronto Raptors' best shooters absent, I think he did a really good job of being able to score and create for other players in kind of a locked phone booth. They were really packing the paint, and he did a really good job of finding guys. So kudos to him. It's a tough job being the leader of a team, and as he showed in the first game, he is still young and developing, and there are still flaws in his game that he needs to improve at, but there is no doubt that he is an extremely talented player. He shot 8 for 11 from the field, which is very impressive. He did not miss many shots. There were moments in the game, and I need to mention this because we're judging him to a higher standard now, because he is such a good player and he is the leader of the team. Having 27 points is obviously impressive, but when you are the best player on a team, there are still some critiques that need to be made, and I will give one for him, which is that it seemed like he coasted a little bit in the third quarter, at parts in the first half. He took his foot off of the gas pedal a little bit, but you cannot criticize the guy too harshly. The Raptors won the game. He came up big at the end. He drew 13 fouls, so he was a large reason why there were 99 free throws in this game. So thanks, Scotty. But I was satisfied with the performance. I think that he had a nice bounce back game. And continuing on that note, we'll talk about Jakob Poeltl, because Jakob Poeltl had a bounce back game. The last game that he played, one of the big problems that he had was the sheer number of turnovers that he committed. The Cavaliers really feasted on the fact that his passes were errant and he was being clumsy with the ball. But last night was a different story. I thought he played a much more composed game. He looked like he knew what he was doing. He only had 2 turnovers, which is, I will accept that. And he was a force around the rim. He outdueled Andre Drummond, who is a solid veteran big, a good backup big. He played better than Drummond, had a couple of nice blocks on him. He had a great swat on Tyrese Maxey. He had a great swat on Gerson Yabusele. He had just a number of really strong possessions around the basket. He scored pretty well inside. He was 5 for 8 from the field, 9 of 11 from the free throw stripe. We got to mention this. I mentioned it on Twitter during the game. His free throw stroke is looking downright normal. I am blown away. If you've seen Jakob Poeltl in the past shoot free throws, it is not a pretty sight. He has gone with a one-handed approach where he just completely removes the guide hand and just kind of uses a normal looking stroke. And he is swishing them, making it look easy from the line, which is a huge development. There's a big difference between a big who shoots in the 50s, a big who shoots in the 60s, and a big who shoots in the 70s from the free throw stripe. If you shoot in the 70s from the free throw stripe, you can be on the floor in clutch moments. There's no hack strategy that can be employed against you. Of course, big men are fouled more often because they are more often underneath the rim, and they will foul guys to prevent them from getting a layup. So if he can continue to make his free throws at a good clip, I don't think he's going to shoot 9 for 11, never forget, from the free throw stripe every night, but I was very pleased with his performance. 19 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks. Hard to ask for a better performance from Jakob Poeltl. Moving along, we will talk Ochai Agbaji, who I think had a very nice game. Ochai Agbaji clearly had a statement preseason. It looked like he had made a mental leap where he was going to impact the game more. And he's still a young player. He's a guy who is going into his 3rd year this season, and he is He's looking determined, he's looking possessed, he is playing on both ends of the floor, and I criticized him in the first game for not making enough of an impact, not doing the hustle stuff that you need to do if your shot isn't falling, and he did that tonight. His cuts were great. He had 2 steals leading to runouts, he made a number of plays in transition, he grabbed offensive rebounds. It was an impressive performance from him. He turned in some great energy. He covered Tyrese Maxey. The unfortunate part is that, you have to say it, he's still not shooting the 3-point shot. He only took 1 3 and he missed it last night. So it's hard to project him as a quality starter if he is not making 3-point shots. And he is a complementary player. If other players are putting pressure on the rim and kicking it out to him, he can shoot open shots. And Scotty Barnes is really the only guy on the team right now that can command a double team, so he has to do more of his work attacking the basket, which he did well. I think perhaps when Emmanuel Quickley and when RJ Barrett return, and to a certain extent Kelly Olynyk return, I think that he will be in a position to shoot open 3-point shots more often, and perhaps he will be able to start taking and making more of those shots. But outside of that, very pleased with his performance. Grady Dick, we'll talk about him because he kind of struggled last night. He was in foul trouble for a lot of the evening. He got isolated against by the Philadelphia 76ers, as we well know. Nick Nurse, one of his favorite things to do is to find the weakest defender on the opposing team and put them into coverage. That's kind of his playbook. So Grady Dick faced a lot of isolation plays, a lot of screen plays. Eric Gordon kind of had his way with him, and it didn't help that the refs were just so whistle happy. I think that was to his detriment. Eric Gordon is a crafty vet. He managed to draw a bunch of fouls on Grady Dick, especially toward the end of the game. And he didn't really play all that much. He only played 24 minutes, but it wasn't really a stellar effort on his part. He had a couple of nice drives, but he only was 1 of 4 from 3. So not a great shooting night from him. I need to see that improve. He scored 8 points with 1 rebound and 1 steal. So not an impactful game from Grady Dick. Hope he can bounce back. And last on the docket for the starters was Davon Mitchell, who I think had a solid game. He put pressure on the defense early. He had a couple of nice 3-point shots to set the tone. They were sagging off of him, and Scotty Barnes passed it out, and he nailed his first shot, which was a catch-and-shoot 3. And then a little later, he had a very nice step-back 3, which he made on a short clock. So that was a nice development. He ended up finishing the game with 8 points, so he kind of did most of his damage early, but he did a good job limiting Tyrese Maxey, being a defensive pest, etc. I think he was much better in the first half. In the second half, he kind of made some questionable decisions. He turned the ball over a couple of times, so it was kind of a tale of 2 halves. I think he played very well in the first half, and then in the second half he kind of tailed off, but I liked his defensive effort, and I would say it was about an average. Nothing to write home about, but a decent performance from Davon Mitchell. And those are the starters, so let's get to the bench. We'll talk about Chris Boucher, because while Chris Boucher did not shoot the ball very well, unlike the last game where he was 4 for 5 from 3-point range, Chris Boucher did all of his damage on the defensive end. Chris Boucher had a number of nasty blocks last night. Really impressive defensive effort from Chris Boucher. I thought he was all over the place. Chris Boucher has really leveled up his decision making. He only had 1 turnover last game, and I feel like he makes the right play when he has the ball in his hands. The majority of the time, most of his passes are on target. He doesn't get picked off very much, but he didn't have a great shooting night. Other than that, I mean, highlights are highlights, and I loved some of the stuff that he did. He really got the team hype on some of those blocks. I was kind of jumped out of my chair watching some of that. Moving along, we'll talk about Bruno Fernando. Bruno Fernando, the game before this one, he had an okay game. Last night, he did not have an okay game. It was ugly. He just didn't have a good game, and I could go further into depth on why that was. 3 turnovers in 8 minutes. Moving along to Jamison Battle, going from to huge smile. Oh man, Jamison Battle had a really cool game. Love to see this guy check in. He can shoot the three, and he is doing stuff out there. He's making passes. He's scoring. He had a really awesome and one toward the end of the game that got the team hype. He was excited. I just like watching this guy play. He plays with fire and energy and intelligence, and he can make shots. He hit a buzzer-beating three near the end of the game to really, it was a kind of a dagger moment for the Toronto Raptors. It was a big shot. It was contested. As I said, it was at the end of the shot clock. Man, he had a really good game. He also fouled out of the game. I mean, if there are 99 free throws, you know, a couple of guys are fouling out, and he was one of them. He only played 15 minutes, but he had 12 points in that game. He was 4 for 5 from the field, had 6 rebounds. So good effort on the boards. He's not a shrimp. The guy is pretty big. I think he's 6'7". So I'm liking him, and he's really been a big surprise off of the Raptors bench. It feels like a minute since they've had a guy come in and surprise everyone like a discovery, and it looks like the Toronto Raptors have a couple of guys like that. Maybe a good segue into Jonathan Mogbo. Oh my God. As I said last night, Jonathan was magnificent. He was fantastic. He was all over the place. He was all over the stat sheet. Jonathan Mogbo, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks and 2 turnovers. But wow, what a game from him. I was just adoring the energy that I saw from him. And you can tell he's still young because he's making mistakes. I likened him to Precious Achiuwa at the beginning of last game because he had a couple of wild sequences. I think he turned it over and had a crazy looking shot attempt that kind of slipped out of his hands. But as the game progressed, that comparison looked less and less and less accurate because this guy knows what's going on. And that was kind of the problem with Precious Achiuwa. Precious Achiuwa's kind of game recognition and understanding of what's going on the court, maybe not at the highest level. Jonathan Mogbo may look a little similar, same hair, similar build, similar height. He knows how to play the game, and he looks very good in transition. As I've said before, I like it when he can handle the ball in transition. He's big and athletic. That's where those kinds of guys can shine. And he did most of his damage on the offensive glass. Mogbo had 5 offensive rebounds, which was impressive. He was out-dueling Andre Drummond, who is a very good defensive rebounder. He was getting his hand on the ball and tipping it to himself. Man, just an energetic performance. He blocked Tyrese Maxey's shot on the perimeter. He was moving those puppies, hustling on the perimeter, guarding guys. Not enough superlatives to talk about how fun and exciting Jonathan Mogbo was last night. In the preseason, he had off and on games, so not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more about what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is a player who knows how to play, has a lot of energy and a lot of positive qualities. So looking to see more from him. Very pleased. Next up, got to talk Jamal Shed, who I think also played well. He did have 7 turnovers, so I can't be quite as effusive in the praise of Jamal Shed as I have been in the past, because 7 turnovers is kind of a nasty stat. Outside of that, man, this guy is a baller. Man, he had a couple of really, really good plays last night. He is a pest on defense. You can tell that guards hate playing against him. He's like a little mosquito that is just in your face and really getting up into you. It can't be fun to play against this guy. So he makes it so much more difficult to get into your sets if you're the opposing team. He really hounds ball handlers. And one of the things that happens there is that maybe it doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but it makes a difference when that player has to give the ball up. So Tyrese Maxey was a victim of his. And also on offense, the guy, 7 turnovers aside, he makes the right play the majority of the time. I'm just really pleased with what I can see from him running the show. He knows what to do on the pick and roll. He is reading plays as they develop. He has good game sense. The mental mapping that all the nerds love to talk about, where they know where players are on the floor, where players are going to be. He has that. You can tell that when he comes off of the screen and goes towards the basket, that he is aware of his surroundings and understands what's going on. He had 11 points on 4 for 11 shooting. He was 1 for 2 from 3, so he's shooting 40% from 3 in the first 2 games of the season. Stop the count. Stop the count. But hopefully he can continue to impress. Really proud of the performance that he and the other guys turned in last night. DJ Carton, gotta mention him. He was good. He was a plus 17 on the game. He only had 1 point, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, but he did have 2 steals as well. I have to shout him out. I can't go into too much detail, but I thought he had a positive game as well. But in all, I would say I am very satisfied with the performance of the team. Very happy for the team. I think that the vibes were great. The vibes in the Cleveland game were dire. They got blown out by 30. It looks like everybody was apprehensive. Everybody was kind of a bit in their heads. It was just kind of an ugly game from all aspects. And you can tell that for a young team, maybe it's hard to get over that mental hurdle. But they absorbed that punch and they came back last night with a really spirited performance, and they played hard defense, and they did a good job sticking to the game plan and really fighting. Had the Toronto Raptors lost that game, I would be sitting here telling you the exact same thing, which is that the energy level, the camaraderie, the passion, the fight that the Toronto Raptors had last night was on full display, and it made me proud to support the team. I want to see that type of effort regardless of the opponent and regardless of the outcome. If the Raptors get down, I want to see them compete and fight like they did last night against a veteran team, if a bit undermanned 76ers. Moving along, the Toronto Raptors will be playing tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves in Minnesota. That cannot be a very easy game for them. The Timberwolves are near full strength. Julius Randle is looking actually very good for them as their cat replacement. They still have Rudy Gobert. They still have Anthony Edwards. They picked up Dante DiVincenzo. They've got a bunch of solid vets. They are a very tough team, and they'll be playing in their building. And this will be a second night of a back-to-back for the Toronto Raptors. And the Raptors are shorthanded. So this is what they say in the biz. They call this a scheduled loss. I'm not expecting the Toronto Raptors to walk out with a positive record, but again, it's about effort, it's about development, it's about finding positives, finding things that you can take away from the game, both from the team's perspective and from my perspective and from viewers' perspectives. If you're going to watch that game, it's going to be about the process, maybe not the result. But interested to watch that game. Hopefully there are some positives to take away. But yeah, that's the video. Hope you were able to take something away from that. Did you enjoy the game? What did you think of the 99 free throw win? Did you enjoy the effort level from the squad? Was there anybody that I didn't mention or a play that I didn't mention that you want to talk about? Feel free to let me know here in the comment section and also on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raps Report. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.